Oh, hello. Welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing Debbie Does Dallas by William the Conqueror. Dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo-doo. So this book, perhaps more than any other that springs to mind on this list, maybe with the exception of, say, Deliverance. Maybe there's one or two others that just aren't, jumping out at me. But Sophie's Choice is kind of ruined by cultural osmosis. And even if you've never heard that term before, you probably know what I mean. Like, you've seen so many cartoons and spoofs of, say, The Sixth Sense. You already know what the ending is, even if you've never seen the actual movie. So I knew what Sophie's Choice was about. Kind of. In any case, I knew what Sophie's Choice was. I think everybody does. You know me, if you've been watching these videos, whatever, spoiler warning, they're all... No, I don't think any of these books are newer than 30 years old. Well, certainly none of them are newer than 13 years old, but I actually think there aren't... I think the most recent one is Ironweed, which was written in like 82, 83. So none of them are really newer than 30-some years old. This one's back in the 60s. But in any case, I digress. We all know what a Sophie's Choice is. We know what Sophie's Choice was. She had to choose which of her two children, one of them would live, one of them would die. And I had a vague sense that it was about the Holocaust, and that, it was something involved with that, with having to choose which child would get to live and which would get to die, and how impossible of a choice that was. So, in a way, the ending of the book is already ruined before you pick it up. I was actually intrigued that when it happened, it was no less impactful for that. Let me loop back around to that. I'll tell you a little bit about the book, the part that I didn't know about, and some of the parts that surprised me. This book is, again, I don't do a whole lot of research on these books. I'm trying to get through them all. It seems like it was pretty realistic. I always hesitate to call these books romantic clefts, but I find myself doing that more and more often because I sort of wonder how an author can, put themselves in that sort of a position if they don't know it. But in any case, the main character, who only goes by the name of Stingo, which is sort of a bastardization of Stinky, which he was called Stinky when he was young, which became Stingo, and he never changed it. So I'm not sure that we ever found out his real name, or if we did, it was somewhat buried, because I can't recall it. But anyway, Stingo, the first few chapters of this book were kind of funny, especially for me as a young, new, aspiring author, because it was about the publishing industry of the 40s, because it actually took place in the 40s. It was written in the 60s. And he was talking about some of the things that still ring true to authors today. So if you are an author, you will certainly enjoy the first few chapters of this. He's writing readers' reports about terrible books. He goes through what's called the slush pile, which, any aspiring author or publishing industry professional can tell you. That's the unsolicited manuscripts, whereas if you get an agent is considered to, have an in with the publisher, and his or her manuscripts are solicited. But if you just are a guy off the street and you send manuscripts to an agent that are unsolicited or to a publisher that are unsolicited, that's called the slush pile. So Stingo spends the first couple of chapters, and I'm overemphasizing this because I enjoyed it, because it's my bailiwick, but he's writing these readers' reports that are really just ripping apart this unrequested, unwanted junk. And I think he said he never referred a single manuscript for approval, and he actually included a couple of readers' reports, which this is where I got the feeling that it had to be at least somewhat realistic. It sounded like he actually wrote these readers' reports. Like, one was about like an epic Norwegian poem that a guy wrote for like 20 years on a farm in the Midwest or something. And so that part was pretty funny and jaunty, and he's kind of a funny, jaunty guy to begin with. He ends up, because he's in New York, and he doesn't have much money, and I think he even got fired, he got fired from the publisher he was working for. So he had to move to Brooklyn for a lower, rent, and he ends up moving into a primarily Jewish boarding house, which is where he meets Sophie and the third part of this kind of love triangle, Nathan, who I was actually surprised how important Nathan was to the book. Cover Nathan real quick. He, as it turns out, is mentally ill, and no one really knows this. Oh, and he's a drug addict and he's mentally ill. So for a lot of the book, they blame his behavior on being eccentric, because it's the 40s and drugs weren't really, well understood. Then about midway through, they find out he's a drug addict and they blame it on that. And then way at the end, they find out he was mentally ill, and that, in combination with everything else, was what really caused his erratic behavior. So sometimes he would act like he was in love with the narrator and Sophie, and sometimes he would be like violent and bloody and horrible to them. And he was so charismatic that people were happy when he was happy and just like wounded when he was rude to them. And then the third part of the book is Sophie, and much of the book is dedicated to her time coming up in Poland. And actually, I was surprised. Sophie was not Jewish. She was a Polish Gentile, and she actually got picked up for smuggling meat, which it was a crime to have meat in Nazi-occupied Poland. And Sophie went to a farm and tried to smuggle a ham in under her dress as though she were pregnant. And so her story also unravels. It's kind of parallel, the way the story's unraveled. So Nathan, all of his lies slowly come to light, and Sophie, all of her lies slowly come to light. So at first, because you're in a Jewish boarding house and she has the tattoo on her wrist, Stingo assumes she was a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and then we find out she was actually a Gentile. And then she talked about how the reason she was caught was because her father protected Jews during the Holocaust. And slowly that's unraveled, and we find out he was actually a Polish Nazi sympathizer. And in the 30s, he wrote a bunch of articles extolling Germany and basically proposed the Holocaust before Germany did. This was her father, who she initially said protected the Jews, and then we find out that that was a lie, and that she was all kinds of wrapped up in it. And so over time, we sympathize for her, of course, the whole time because she's a victim of the Holocaust, but we find out more and more how complicit she is, and why she feels so guilty about it, because she refused to fight with the Polish partisans, even though she had like ample opportunity. She refused to, aid them because she had kids. And so gradually her whole story is unraveled, and it turns out that although she was an ordinary criminal rather than being sent to the camps for racial reasons, she was sent as a criminal. She increasingly feels guilt over it, and we're led to question, did she bring this on herself? Did she, suffer for her fence sitting, I guess you would say? Because she never did anything overtly bad. She never joined with her father, and her father also got sent to the camps and died well before she did. And it raises a whole lot of really thorny issues. But then the crux of the book is when it gets to her choice, and this is really touching, because she was well educated and wealthy and a Gentile. She spoke German, and when she came to Auschwitz with her children, instead of just walking by, there was an SS doctor that was pointing people left and right, whether you're going to go to the labor camp or whether you're going to go to the extermination camp. And she could have just walked by him, but instead he started speaking to her in German, and she responded. And this guy, this doctor, said, you can choose one of your children to live. Make the choice now or they both die. And on the split instant, she had to make that choice. And so it's all about, it's all about being faced with choices and what level of guilt you should feel for the choices you make, and for, things that are beyond your control, like are you mentally ill like Nathan? Are there greater, political things going on like with Sophie? And it was a very harrowing, disturbing book. And this is one of those books that was a slow read for me. I know I keep emphasizing this, but this is one of those books where a page was about 2 minutes for me to read, but it never was hard. What was the last one I read? It was never hard. I'm gonna totally botch this, but some books are just gibberish. This one was really kept you in the moment and kept you wanting to read, and it was difficult because of its length, not because of not being immersed in the story. So definitely a disturbing story, raised a lot of thorny points, and philosophically was very intriguing. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.